Hello, and welcome to We Got Issues, the only comic book podcast willing to cut through all the BS and get you the truth. Comic books are awesome and totally not nerdy at all. I'm Brian Compton, aka BComp, and joining me as always is my best friend Josh Markwith, the Jesse Pinkman to my Walter White. How you doing, Josh?
Yeah, comics, bitch. Oh man, I came in really strong on that one. Sorry, I don't normally do that. I think we're going from the whole truth bomb and everything. I got amped up, and then the Jesse Pinkman stuff, which I just finished. Better Call Saul too. Fully watched it.
Still need to finish that. I know it's a good show, and I'm like, every time I start watching, I'm like, this is awesome, and then I fall off, and I'm like, I don't remember where I left off. I got to start it all over again.
Yeah, you definitely have to be in that mindset. It's like how Breaking Bad was for me. Like I couldn't just, I'm gonna watch Breaking Bad today. I had to be in that mindset. Like I'm gonna be getting a lot of information in 1 hour.
Yeah, I know. Breaking Bad is one of the finest shows ever made. It's just you have to be in the mode. It's pure and simple.
Yeah, and it's very good. It's also good to have on just in the background while you're working through stuff. So I call it a background show because you can still jump in and out, paying attention to. So
that's funny. Like my show's The Office. That's the one I can just have on the background. But then what ends up happening is I put it on in the background, and then I just find myself sitting on the couch just watching it. I'm like, same with Next Gen. Like Star Trek Next Gen is the same way.
Okay. Oh man, I still remember. One of my fondest memories of Next Gen is when we were at was it your friend Andrew's mutual friend Andrew's birthday.
Mutual friend.
Yeah. But this is when I first was meeting him. And we went to that Korean barbecue, and we had so much like meat because it was like at the end of the day, and we had to you guys started like packing the meat like it was like a fish market.
Yeah, we were like wrapping it up in napkins and hiding it in our pockets.
Yeah. And then we went back to your place, and then we started watching the Next Gen episode they're in that time loop.
I thought it was Messing with Worlds. Or was it was it
the one with the one with Kelsey Grammer at the end.
Yeah, Cause and Effect.
Yeah, Cause and Effect. I remember that, and I could not get through it because I had meat sweats.
Yeah, you were literally sweating on my couch.
Sweating so bad.
It was winter.
It was very cold, and
it was literally December 30th.
I could not stay awake, and not for the lack of the show being good. It was just I was so full of cooked meat. It was just bad. I had to be peeled off the couch, and then
we had to break you off the couch.
Yeah, I didn't even know how I made it home.
Speaking of breaking things, whether it's Breaking Bad or breaking Josh off the couch, today we're breaking down a book that helped reshape the Wildstorm universe. I'm talking about The Authority. But of course, before we get into that, we have some housekeeping. You want to take this one, Josh?
Sure, yeah. Now, if you've ever been munching on some gummies or trail mix and said to yourself, this is good, but it'd be better if it's just a little bit more mysterious with a hint of legendary, then you should must check out Duff and Shaw Snacks. Now, whether it's Buffalo Ranch cashews or sacred gummy bears, Duff and Shaw Snacks and candy are curated from the most mysterious and undiscovered places on planet Earth. They've been uncovering flavors that will give you stories to tell your grandchildren. Now go to duffandshaw.com/issues. duffandshaw.com/issues today and check out all they've got and more. Now that's duffandshaw.com/issues, and the most legendary snacks in the world can finally be yours. And please make sure to use that full URL, the duffandshaw/issues, so it helps out the podcast. Thank you.
Very good.
Thank you.
So, with that said, what are we doing again today?
Yeah. So what's the episode about? No, so last episode we were celebrating the 30th anniversary of Marvel's. Now we are going to be chatting about another book that reached a milestone with its 25th anniversary. Talking about The Authority.
Now, it should also be noted that this is one of the movies that's on James Gunn's dream list to do. Supposedly it's in pre-pro or they're working on it or whatever. It's not officially there, but it's there. We know that one of the characters from The Authority, the engineer, is expected to make an appearance in the upcoming Superman film as well. So it is kind of pertinent to like know about this team, know about its history, and what you can expect as we head into the new DC film slate.
Yeah. And definitely, and then also, just what we'll be talking about in this episode is just how much this has inspired a lot of works and a lot of different aspects of how we know comics today.
This book had to crawl so books like The Boys, the show The Boys, and the book that spawned that show, and books like The Ultimates could run. It almost is it's the precursor to all of it. It is the 21st century superhero book, and it's the start of what we now know as the modern like super team book, I would argue.
I think it brought more of an adult audience, but on a grander superhero scale. Like it's kind of like the rated R blockbuster.
Yeah, it's definitely, or at least a high-end PG-13 like sensibilities. It had that like sort of Michael Bay level of production with it. Whether you like Michael Bay or not, you can't deny his movies are spectacles, and that definitely was this. And I mean that in, again, the best way possible. I don't mean that as an insult, against Michael Bay films or an insult to the comics. It's just like this book was big and bold and loud and, well, for lack of a better word, fun.
Yeah, so and then that, as you can probably tell, our thoughts on this book is very, very positive because we both love just the content of it. And I definitely, I mean, me, I'm this artist. Yeah, I'm one of his stands, so I'm just really into this artist and how this book is portrayed and just the different characters and the writing and stuff. It's definitely I really like this book. The specific volume.
Yeah, I have. We'll get into this later, but my kind of general thoughts is like I really do have fond memories of this book. It's like one of those movies you watch as a kid. And you're like, oh man, this movie's so awesome. Then you watch it as an adult. You're like, it's still good. It's a little dated. It's a little, not as contemporary as I thought it would be or whatever, but it's still good. You know what I mean? But we'll get into that in a little bit.
Yeah. So, but before we get fully into The Authority, we can have to backtrack a little bit and just kind of discuss some of the behind the scenes stuff that happened that brought it into fruition. So, Brian, can you tell me more about kind of how publisher Wildstorm kind of came together and what happened to that?
Yeah, I'll talk basically just about Wildstorm itself without not too much about actually the book itself. So, for those of you who don't know, back in the 90s, early 90s, 7 artists split off from Marvel. And I think I've talked about this before. It was Mark Silvestri, Todd McFarlane, Jim Lee, Rob Liefeld, I think Jim Valentino, did I say Eric Larson already? Anyway, 7 of them left and formed basically Image Comics. Jim Lee who's hot off X-Men, kind of creates his, not X-Men team, but creates a team called Wildcats. And from there also creates another team called Stormwatch. Eventually, he would sort of combine the two, Wildcats and Stormwatch, to create his own studio, Wildstorm. From there, they published a lot of different comics. There was a couple imprints with Wildstorm, like Homage Comics and Cliffhanger Comics. But this is the team, this group was the team that Marvel hired half of to help with their Heroes Reborn initiative back in the 96, 97. From there, DC is like, hey, these guys are pretty cool. They're pretty talented. And DC started making offers to buy Wildstorm. And so in, I believe, 98, they were eventually picked up by DC, which meant they got their entire library along with all the artists and all the writers. They got people like Alan Moore, who was writing for them. Like I said, they got Jim Lee as an artist. And the big thing is they also got all the colorists and inkers and all of that. That was like a big get for DC, as well as getting a new market share of titles like Wildstorm and Stormwatch. And there was a lot of other books at the time, like Out There, I think Battle Chasers, a bunch of other books kind of like they were going to get to add to their portfolio, basically. That's kind of the long and short of it. There's a lot more to it. Like no one actually knows how much they were purchased for. Some people suspect it was like 100 million, but no one actually knows what it was. But the big get too is also just getting Jim Lee, because that brought Jim Lee into the DC house, which meant they got Jim Lee doing covers. They got Jim Lee doing Batman. I mean, that led to Hush, so it was a big get for DC, basically.
And eventually down the line, he's now the creative. He's a high executive at DC right now. So he's head of creative, which is another just big get from the beginning. That just like an egg, just kind of hatched into something more and more and more.
So one of the titles was Stormwatch, like as I had mentioned, and that led to a book called The Authority. One of the things we like to do on this show is read from the blurb in the back so we can tell you a little bit of context about what we're going to talk about. So, Josh, can you tackle that for us?
Yes, I have a blurb on the back right here. So, the Authority are heroes in only the strictest sense of the word, ruthless and unforgiving. This group of insanely powerful superhumans face down countless menaces to Earth, protecting mankind with their cold version of justice. An invasion from an alternate Earth, an international terrorist who is laying waste to major cities, and a hostile alien intelligence who calls himself God, all fall under their rule. This is the Authority. Pay allegiance or get your head kicked in.
Yeah.
All right, that's a blurb. Yeah, that's it.
That is correct. I mean, the Authority was like the first big superhero team of the 21st century. It combined high-octane action and beautiful visuals, along with well-defined characters who were equal parts, cynical but moral and powerful. I mean, this book literally created the genre. I mean, this book literally coined the phrase widescreen comics. This is the birth of the blockbuster comic.
Definitely, it's where Mr. Hitch, started that style, and he became known for that style of books, and it's what you want to kind of see from him. And where Warren Ellis's writing was a mix of cleverness, great moments, great one-liners. So it's like like we were saying, it's kind of summer blockbuster book.
I like to joke that some people know the Authority, and they know it because of basically for this run, which was done by Warren Ellis. They also know it for the Mark Millar run that followed subsequently. And then it's kind of known for everything else, which has been just a hodgepodge and a mix and a mess. It's sad because there's actually a lot of good writers that have been
For real
on those runs and good artists too. Like you got Grant Morrison, you've got Ed Brubaker, I believe Giffen did a run. I mean, like there's a lot of good writers, but it all kind of just fizzled out after Mark Millar's run. So it's really known, like you got Warren Ellis's, Mark Millar's, and then you got everything else, and it's just like, okay. So that said, on today's show, I think we're going to focus just on the Warren Ellis of it all, because I think we can dedicate an entire episode to Mark Millar, and then probably if we wanted to down the road, focus more on, the other incarnations, for lack of a better word.
Totally. And then what's funny too, like it's kind of great writers with great artists too. And Warren Ellis had Hitch, and then Mark Millar has Frank Quietly.
So I always call him Quietly.
Yeah. So apologies for saying your name wrong, but Quietly is always in my head, and I say that to myself quietly. So I mean, great writers and great artists too that are well done for the book.
Well, so let me tackle Ellis, and you can take over Brian Hitch. How about that?
Let's do that. Yeah, I'm good with that.
Okay, so for the creative teams, as I mentioned, Warren Ellis he had written this book. If you don't know who Warren Ellis is, he's an English author. He's known for comics like Transmetropolitan and Planetary. He's also known for like introducing new story elements and character changes to long-standing other characters. For example, in Moon Knight, he created the white suit-wearing Mr. Knight. In Iron Man, if you know anything about the extremist stuff that you see in Iron Man 3 or in a lot of Iron Man comics, he created that concept. He also did like a bunch of stuff in the X-Men titles. He created this whole Counter X line. He writes comics, video games, cartoons, prose. He's mostly known for his socio kind of cultural commentary, where he often explores themes of futurism and transhumanism. Of course, he is not without controversy, but we'll get into that in just a second.
Yeah, that's a full thing. And more on with Warren Ellis, he actually wrote one of my favorite Justice League Unlimited episodes. It was the Heart of Darkness, right? Yeah, with all the nanobites and stuff, which kind of is like a parallel to the one issue, or excuse me, the story, the God issue,
Outer Dark.
Yeah, exactly. It has some similarities in those stories, with the central kind of like pollution and everything like that, kind of part of their whole thing. Which again, we might even have just a whole episode on Justice League Unlimited, because I love that show, and I could talk more and more about that. More like we'd have like a couple episodes about that. So with Warren Ellis was the great artist of Brian Hitch. Brian Hitch is known, like we were saying, for his detailed art, and then also his widescreen, huge action centerpieces. And he's done a lot of interiors for Marvel and Impact and Image and Wildstorm and a lot of DC. He even wrote and drew a Justice League America run.
Mhm.
But I mean, one of my favorite works of his was the Ultimates Volume 1 and 2, which
Mhm.
with Mark Millar, and a lot of similarities in that art that he started in the Authority. And like we were saying, the Authority is kind of where there was this coming out party. It was
Yeah.
definitely like his art is very unapologetic. It's very cinematic. Again, I keep saying this, but it's true. It's you're watching you're reading a summer blockbuster.
Yeah.
And that's what I love about his art.
Yeah, he to me is like a sort of like Alan Davis. I don't know if you've read Alan Davis. He's got
Mhm.
that kind of the smooth lines like Alan Davis does, but he is, like you said, cinematic. It's you see the real scope of everything. You see the city lines, you see like middle dots on it, like, oh, that's the character there. So you get a sense of
Yeah.
scope and size to everything. I've always enjoyed him for that, but I do think like this is the book that put him on the map because he had been drawing comics since like the late '80s, I want to say.
Mhm.
Because I remember like even in the '90s, I think he did like X-Men Prime, he did like an X-Men Brood
Right.
crossover. So he'd been around for a bit. I think he did some She-Hulk stuff. But like this is the book that like Stormwatch would like he started working with Ellis on Stormwatch, but Authority is what put him on the map.
Yeah, he was in and out of Stormwatch. He
Yeah.
it was with somebody else. I can't off the top of
Tom
my head.
Rainey.
Tom Rainey, yes. You see it in the issues. Some characters would be Tom Rainey. Some would be he would follow. Kind of like what we did, what they did with the GCPD. I loved his art, and I still love his art. And he did Age of Ultron as well.
Yeah. He's done some other stuff that I really love. Like it's too bad there's a book that he started with Mark Waid called like those like the Last Days of Superman, or it's one of those big Prestige magazine format books.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's The Last Days of Lex Luthor. I forget exactly what the title was, but it's a Superman book. They did one issue out, and it's like, this is great. Where are the other two, y'all? So I don't know if we'll ever get those.
I think that's another thing for him too. He generally it takes a long time to get that good stuff out. So
Yeah.
there's sometimes there's some delays that kind of bog him down.
Yeah, I'd be, I know we're way off topic already, but I would be fine with the delays. Like, just tell us it's going to be every 6 months we're going to get an issue. It's like, that's
Right.
fine. Just let me know what's going to happen. It's been a year, literally a year since that first issue came.
So with this creative team, we do have to kind of talk about the elephant in the room about
Yeah.
Warren Ellis and the controversy that's kind of come up with him in these recent years. You know a little bit more about this than I do, so what's kind of more about that?
Yeah, and I say this as a person who really liked Warren Ellis, but in 2020, like Ellis was accused by several, and I mean like probably in the dozens, if
Mhm.
not higher, several women of like sexual manipulation and coercion. And it was really detailed in this website called So Many of Us. Ellis eventually did respond to it saying like, hey, I hurt many people that I had no intention of hurting, and that he took responsibility and culpability for his mistakes. So then from there, he apparently ended a mediated dialogue with a lot of the members of the website, but it looks like that has like since fallen apart. So something happened and people were hurt, and he's admitted there was hurt, but he hasn't really admitted like anything beyond that outside of like, people got hurt. I'm sorry about that. I didn't even say I'm sorry. It's like I take responsibility for that. So, it really does bring up that whole thing of like, where can you like, I don't want to say can you separate the art from the artist, but it makes it very hard because like I said, I'm a big, big fan of this cat. What about you, Josh? What do you think? I mean, I have thoughts, but I want to hear what you have to say.
No, yeah, it's very disheartening when you hear stuff about that when you've followed this writer for so long. You're such a I'm big. I'm also a big fan of his work. With Next Wave, with like we said, just other bunch of
Transmet, Planetary.
yeah, Planetary. I mean, he's been very innovative.
He's a great writer, whether it's his Secret Avengers stuff or his Moon Knight stuff or whatever.
But it's like you said, I know you didn't like it, but it's can you separate the art from the artist, and can you have it like in the back of your head when you're reading the stuff?
Yeah, I mean, this is something I struggle with, especially now. Like, for some reason, there's some creators that I can like. You made a mistake, and I can move on, and there's some creators I can't. And I don't know where that line is. It seems like almost not all, but a lot of creators have skeletons in the closet, whether it's out in the open or it's still behind closed doors. And some of these people we've forgiven, and some of them we haven't. Do we expect all of our creators to be morally virtuous people, or do we just say everyone sucks on some level and we just have to allow for bad behavior? I don't know.
And it's tough with the level that Ellis has been it's been recently. So I think it gets a little bit harder to separate it, or just to you get, because I mean it's these stories of our story of our childhood, but it's just, it's more of stuff we've been a fan of for a long time, and it's intrinsic to our fandom.
Well, or our fan DNA, it's like, I don't think there's like a one size fits all answer for this. Ultimately, I don't know. I kind of always say, like, I don't know what the line is, but I know it when I see it. I can't define it, but I know it when I see it. The questions I kind of ask myself is, like, has the artist genuinely tried to make amends for their mistakes? Is the art bigger than the artist? Does the art transcend the actual artist itself? Is the art so intrinsically entwined with the artist that you can't separate the two? Right. And also, is the artist still significantly profiting from the art? You know what I mean? Like, these are the questions I have to ask myself. It's like, I love Lethal Weapon. Mel Gibson, turns out he's a turd, and it sucks because I love those movies so much, and it makes it really hard. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and it's with the recent, or not recent, but the news with Neil Gaiman. And
Neil Gaiman.
And I was such a fan of Jeff Johns, and when you hear stuff about him, it's just hard. It's hard to hear, but it shouldn't be ignored.
I think ultimately it is a case-by-case basis, and it's also a person-by-person basis. If you like someone and you're able to look past it, hey, good on you. Other people, like, you can't look past it. I get it too. Like,
yeah,
at the end of the day, vote with your wallet is what I would say. If you find someone's actions so morally reprehensible that you can't do it, then don't. And don't take anybody's guff when you're like, oh, you can't do it. It's like, no, I don't want to.
Yeah.
This is that all said. The authority.
Let's move on to what let's move on to the nice stuff. Let's move on to the authority stuff.
The authority's still a fun book.
Yeah, I can separate on this with this, so it's. I just want to. We'll be focusing more just on the authority and how great this book is, and
yeah, and to that real quick. I mean, this book is obviously it's the brainchild of Warren Ellis, but so many other hands were involved in the process of making it. From the artists and the inkers to editorial to the publisher. So it's like, I don't want to say like I can just dismiss what Warren Ellis did, but I do really like the book.
No.
And so I'm gonna. I purchased all of this stuff. I purchased all this stuff even before I knew, so I'm not gonna throw it away. So
right.
I don't know if that's the right answer either. I apologize. I don't have the right answer. I don't know if I will ever have the right answer.
It's two straight white guys talking about it when we don't.
Yeah, exactly.
I mean, I have no experienced opinion on this. So.
Please inform me on my. Feel free to hit me up on the old Blue Sky.
So let's talk about Authority and Stormwatch.
Sounds good.
Even better, Stormwatch, which I am not a fan of. But let's talk about Stormwatch.
I love that when I texted you, I'm like, "Hey, are you reading it?" You're all, "Yeah, I am." I could read it through your text. It's like it was like driven. Yeah, I'm reading this, quote unquote.
If I could roll my eyes, which I can't for some reason, my eyes would get just the circles on the Stormwatch.
So before I get into like who Stormwatch was, and we'll make it quick, I do want to ask: did you read Authority when it came out? B, read Stormwatch before you read Authority? Or C, did you read when you did your research? Did you read Stormwatch before you reread Authority? What was your reading timeline?
It was C. So I had read Authority way long time ago, and because I think Stormwatch, the volumes and stuff just weren't available to me at the time, so I just kind of chalked it up to like, okay, this is a backstory that it doesn't seem to need to know, and so I just read Authority, and then in the research for this, it was like I was reading again. I was like, I'm gonna have to read Stormwatch, like just in that tone too. I'm gonna have to read Stormwatch, and I read through those, and I was like, oh, okay, now I know why I didn't read Stormwatch before, and I was really glad I didn't, because this was it was a hard read for me.
Okay,
and which is funny enough because it's the same guy. It's Warren Ellis, but it's still a hard read for me. Okay. It was very 90s.
Yeah.
And not in the good sense.
Was there a good sense of the 90s?
Yeah, I don't know if there is a good sense.
I love the 90s. That doesn't mean it was
I
necessarily
love the
good.
90s. You remember that show? I love the 90s. I love the
No,
80s.
I remember the
That
80s
was
one. I didn't
VH1.
watch the 90s one. It's too close to home on that 90s one.
But so, Brian, explain more what Stormwatch is.
Stormwatch was created in 1993. It was a sort of superhuman response team run by the United Nations, and it's set in the Wildcats universe. It was originally written by people like Jim Lee and Brendan Choi, eventually Ron Mars, and I think Warren Ellis picks up the book in around issue 37. He starts adding characters like Jenny Sparks, Jack Hawksmoor, and he realigns the teams into a more of a public, like into three different separate teams. He's got the public-facing team, which is Stormwatch Prime. He's got a covert black ops team called Stormwatch Black, and then there's also basically like a weapons of mass destruction team called Stormwatch Red. He kind of runs it more like a G.I. Joe team as opposed to like a, muscles and guns and pecs and blades and all the crap we saw in the 90s. Eventually, he relaunches the book with Volume 2, in which we get much more of a closer precursor to what we see with the Authority. He introduces characters like Apollo and Midnighter, as well as we see early versions of the Engineer and the Doctor. And these are all characters, of course, within the Authority. What eventually happens is Warren Ellis finds out that the book is taking a bath in terms of numbers. Like, it is like not making money. It is the opposite of making money. And like, he's like, what the hell's going on here? He goes to the Wildstorm offices and is like, yo, why are we making this book if it's not making money? They're like, oh, we just like to read it. It's really good. So we're just going to keep publishing just so we can read it and keep you employed. And he's just like, are you kidding me? And he like literally was like, I felt terrible. I was like, this is horrible. These guys are just doing this as a pity book for me. And he kind of at that point is like, okay, all right, if we're going to do this, we're going to do this right. And that's what kind of spawned the Authority. He's like, he's like, I'm having this good collaboration with Brian Hitch. We're going to redo it. We're going to reset it. Now, little side note to all of this. So you can pick up all of these issues like in trades, like, there's like Volume 1 and Volume 2. There's a secret mini issue missing, though, that most people don't know about it. Josh, you want to talk about that for a second? Or you want to hear it?
Yeah. It's what's funny is that one of the most pivotal issues of Stormwatch is in a crossover of Wildcats and Aliens.
Yes, aliens, the Xenomorph aliens.
The James Cameron,
Ellen Ripley, Ridley Scott aliens.
Which is it's one issue too. It's only one issue.
96 pages.
Right. And they queue it up in an issue in Stormwatch, and then it goes to Wildcats, and then it goes back to Stormwatch. So it was so weird. And it's an issue that is damn near hard to find. Like, I had to find somewhere online where you could read it, because it's not, I couldn't find it on Comixology.
Nope.
It's like one issue. This one issue is on like eBay or Amazon for like $90.
Yeah, it's
issue.
Go ahead.
No, it's an issue, which is crazy, and it's Wildcats too. Like, so you're like if you're just reading Stormwatch, you're like randomly like, why is this Wildcats? Who cares about this team? And they kind of try to like explain their team a little bit too.
Yeah.
And then you have to kind of know the backstory of the Demonites, and then all those stuff, and then
Grifter and Zealot.
And Zealot, which they kind of have a little bit in Stormwatch before she makes an appearance, and then Spartan and all those people. So you're just like, and you can tell they do like exposition in there, and they're like, I can't remember the big dude in Wildcats, the guy.
Oh, Maul.
He's like Maul, Maul. So like he like has a little line. It's like, I'm strong and I get, you're a technologist. You should know all the science stuff. But when I get bigger, I kind of get stupid. So it's like one little thing where
it's the Chris Claremont School of Writing.
Yeah, exactly. It's just, let me just do all this exposition in just this one sentence of the line.
Which is crazy, though. It's like this issue literally kills off like 4 members of the team, and major members of the team.
Characters.
Like main characters. Because like apparently when Warren Ellis, they pitched it to him, like, hey, we want you to write this crossover issue. He's like, that sounds bloody stupid. I'm not doing it. They're like, we'll let you kill off anybody you want and it's gonna stick. He's like, well, really? And then he's like, okay, sure then. And he kills off like basically half of Stormwatch. So he can literally lay the table down for the Authority. But like this issue, because it's a crossover issue with a third-party IP, it is impossible to reprint. Because like DC doesn't own it. Dark Horse doesn't own it anymore. In fact, right now, the Aliens license is owned by Fox, which is owned by Marvel. So getting this issue is fucking impossible. It's only been reprinted twice. It's one in a Dark Horse DC crossovers book, which had like, it literally is like all the Wildstorm stuff's like Grifter meets the Mask, and there's like, it's like randomly like, okay, that's weird. And then also the only other one is in one of the initial trades when they were collecting all of Warren Ellis' stuff. They collected it in that. I think it's called Final Orbit. I have both of them, but like, if you don't have those books or the initial issue, it's gone. In fact, so in Josh's before we started recording, like I literally this weekend I was at my comic shop and I ran into a dude who worked at DC. He's like, "Oh, that issue gave us so much hell because we can't reprint it because of the Aliens license." So when you read Stormwatch from 10 to 11, the issue takes place in between there. Issue 10 and a half, which is essentially Wildcats Aliens, like it's just missing. So you really go from like, hey, there's this weird rock flying at us to the next issue where they're like, bunch of the team is dead, but we're not going to explain how they died.
Right. And we no longer have a team. Like Stormwatch is done. And so all on it's like they killed them off screen. It's like
and no explanation how they killed them off screen either. They can't even use like flashback.
Yeah, it's so crazy, and it's so like thank God you told me about it too, or else I would have been even more confused and hated that book even more for how 90s it was. It's like, oh my God, like it Stormwatch. It's a crazy issue, but I'm going to be honest. I was very happy to see Stormwatch die.
Oh, it's fine.
It's the Stormwatch was Ennis Light before Ennis, which is crazy to me.
I enjoyed the take. You see a lot of like Ellis's like a lot of like his themes in this book, like where he creates like super teams, like we're here to save the world and no one's gonna stop us, and like creating like sort of like siloed teams to do each kind of mission. You see a lot of that like in the Secret Avengers run. So I actually kind of liked it. It was like, oh, you see a lot of his DNA in that book that you would see later on in other books. So for that, I enjoyed it. It was 90s, but if I had been reading this in the 90s, it would have blown my mind, not just because of like the edginess of extreme 90s, but like just because like, oh, this is doing something different than Justice League or Avengers or X-Men. You know what I mean? I think looking back on it through that historical lens, like, it probably doesn't hold up as well as we think.
Yeah, what we were talking about it before when I was just venting on how much I didn't like it. We were saying like it was a precursor for a lot of actually comic book tropes, but I was saying like yes, it may have been the first, but it's definitely not the best way to do it, and it was not the best ones to do it. Like you definitely have, like you said, like the different teams and stuff that like X-Men took that. Like Grant Morrison's run was basically like Stormwatch for X-Men, and in a way. I mean, like he has some adult themes in there and kind of like gross out stuff in it, like what I was talking about, the Ennis Light, and then of course there's American rednecks that are just, of course, super racist and against the one black leader of the team.
Yeah, there's also they were dropping the N-word hard in those issues. Like, I mean, straight up the N-word. I was like, we're doing that.
I was like, did not know. I was like, no.
Done. I forgot about that until you mentioned. I'm like, oh yeah, I forgot about how edgy we were there.
It's very edgelord.
Yes. So with that, all out of the way, all that context, all that preamble, all that background information about the team and the company and the Ellis of it all, where are we now?
So coming straight off the end of Stormwatch, we became the Authority, which was basically a continuation of the Stormwatch Black team into their own, kind of taking the covert to the overt in a sense. It was led by Jenny Sparks, who is a centennial being.
Yep, century being. Century Baby, I think. Century Baby is with
Century Baby. I think at the beginning, the kind of the baby concept didn't come until I think Mark Millar's run, but it was just kind of like a century person who has like all electricity powers. Like she becomes electricity, she controls it. You have Jack Hawksmoor, who is like a city telepath. Like he has
God. He's the god of cities.
Yeah, God of Cities. That's right. Yeah, he has all his power from being inside urban areas. He's super strong. He can read the city itself. Like the city itself talks to him, and he kind of can see stuff that's happened in different places. Kind of like what's the telepath that can like touch stuff and they kind of see what happened. He was kind of like that type of stuff. The city tells him what's going on. So, and then there's Swift, It was a concept throughout Stormwatch and actually throughout the Wildstorm universes, like the seeded or the touch from the comet, that kind of the radiation that turns them into like mutants, basically.
Yeah. She's the
And
only character, too, that was not created by Ellis, I believe, through either Stormwatch or Authority.
oh, nice. Oh, yeah, I had no idea about that.
She was
But
further developed by him, so she got her
yeah,
wings and her claws and all that, but she's the only character that managed to come over from a
hmm
pre-Ellis run on the book.
awesome. Yeah, yeah. And then from there is Apollo and Midnighter, who were introduced in the volume 2, which I think that was the start for me of how it was getting better. Like you're saying,
Yeah.
just wait for volume 2.
Yeah.
That they definitely were getting better, and they were kind of like the Batman and Superman analogs. Basically, Apollo, all his powers are solar based, like strength and flight and laser beams out of the eyes and stuff. And Midnighter is
Powered by the
Batman.
sun and all that.
Yeah, yeah, and then Midnighter is literally Batman on steroids. So
Well, he's Batman without the ears.
that one, but literally like on steroids. Like he has
Yep.
like all these neural enhancements. He's so, like quicker and all this stuff, and his brain kind of works more faster. Kind of like Deathstroke in a sense. Like he's on another level. Like he can see a million different ways of how a battle is going to happen before you
even
start,
throw your first punch.
which he'll tell you every time.
Yes,
And then,
it's the Wolverine. I'm the best at what I do, and what I'm doing is not very nice.
Right, exactly. And he'll say that almost in every issue.
Every
So
issue.
just every time you see him, even in other books that he shows up in. And then we have the engineer, who's this version of the engineer is new because there was a previous engineer in Stormwatch in Volume 2 when it was a team by the High. It was called the High. Yeah,
another Superman analog.
Yeah, another Superman analog, and this engineer, and it was very was a technopath, and then also like a lot of nanotechnology and everything, and then also you have the Doctor, who is not that Doctor, not the one you're thinking of, but it's a different Doctor. It's more of a shaman.
Oh, the one from Voyager.
Yes, exactly, the one from Voyager. That's what everybody was thinking of. The Star Trek Doctor from Voyager of the one season that not a lot of people even know about Star Trek. That's the one.
No, he was in 7 seasons. Star Trek Voyager, man. He was in 7 seasons. The Doctor.
Totally.
The nature of your medical emergency.
Oh my goodness. And then there we go. Brian goes on a Star Trek tangent. Da 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 da. No, yeah, and Doctor. This is another one. There was a previous version. Was in the High team, and who is kind of like the best way to I kind of thought of it. Did you ever watch the show Last Airbender?
No, I was not into Avatar.
That's okay. Nobody's perfect. So Avatar.
No, I'm also an old man.
Yeah, but you got to watch it though too.
Actually, it's funny though. I have the Blu-rays though for when my kid gets older. I bought them specifically when my kid is old enough we can watch them on Blu-ray.
Once you get done with all the Timverse stuff, I mean, it's the same animation studio, so it's in Andrea Romano, so it's Chef's Kiss. Mwah! It's very good.
Nice.
So, but no, so there's a concept with the Avatar where the Avatar can all the past avatars live within the current Avatar. It's like a reincarnation type of thing. You can also talk to them and everything. So that's what kind of this Doctor can. He talks to, and he can confer with all the previous Doctors throughout, I mean, the beginning of the Earth, beginning of time.
He's the first Doctor and the last Doctor at the same time.
Yes. His powers are more reality changing based. So kind of like think of like the Avatar Last Airbender mixed with Scarlet Witch and drugs. So that's basically kind of like the current Doctor.
Yeah, like one of his moments that I really like with the Doctor is when Apollo is flying way too fast and he's about to find an unmovable object, is about to be hit an unstoppable force. Unfortunately, he's not an unstoppable force. He is a stoppable force, and he's about to get splattered. And at the last second, the Doctor transports him to a reality where anything going over the speed of 100 miles an hour is converted into like music or something like that. I was like, it was real weird ethereal concept. Like, that's cool. That's fun.
Yeah, it's definitely kind of Ellis having more fun with his powers and just coming up with weird scenarios and just how he thinks like these guys were shooting at him, and he's like, I just saw them with flowers, and then they became flowers. So
Mhm.
it's a very interesting character, and it's very fun. I mean, now the volumes that we're talking about are kind of in 3 arcs of 4 issues each, and we'll break them down for you. And then Brian, what's the first one? Gamora Island.
Yeah, I believe it's called The Circle, the actual arc
Mm-hmm.
itself, and it's basically a villain left over from Stormwatch. His name is Kaizen Gamora. He's a sort of, I hate to say this, but he's like that sort of yellow menace from like old comics and stuff like that,
Uh-huh.
which was definitely problematic. But I think they realized it was problematic, and that's why they kind of leaned into it to make fun of it. I don't know what's going on, but yeah, he's basically just like this evil Asian character who's now wants to exact revenge on the planet because Stormwatch is gone, so he doesn't have to worry about it. And he decided he's going to basically carve his signature or his symbol, which is a circle with 3 dots on it, into the earth so everyone knows that the earth is his. This also goes back to Stormwatch, who was a villain from Stormwatch, and he wants retribution from one of his previous attacks where he killed like 240 people in England, I want to say, or around that number. So they were like, oh, you killed 240 people in England? Cool. And they send in one of their people, and they're like, just kill 240 people. We don't care who it is. And so he wants revenge for that. So has he done this? Using cloning farms and super genetics, he creates like these essentially clones of superhumans that just like fly in like missiles and just bomb the hell. I believe it's like they first hit Moscow and they just wreck Moscow. And that's where like Jenny shows up with the authority. It's like, we had no idea this happened. We were taking care of something else. It won't happen again. And then they're like, that's when you kind of meet the authority. They're on this big ship called the Carrier, which exists between the walls of reality. It's called the Bleed, and they're able to use this ship to kind of transport themselves anywhere. And they're basically watching for when these idiots show up again, because they're going to stop them. And the next spot, I believe, is was it L.A. or was it London? I think it was the next spot.
I think it was Los Angeles.
Was it Los?
Or was it Los Angeles the end of the one, or was it
Los
LA?
Angeles is the last one. Is Los Angeles the last one?
Yes, LA. Yeah, so London was
Moscow. Yeah, London. And luckily, Jenny Sparks, she's from London, so she takes it quite personally.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's where they confront them and kind of kick some ass. Then, of course, they're like, okay. And again, it sounds very basic, and the story is very basic, but the visuals in this are breathtaking. They literally are. It's like literally like huge widescreen panels with just like these armies of dudes flying over the city, arcing through and just like dive bombing. And then it gets like real close in on the action too, where you see people like literally trying to not get crushed by boulders. It's the art really sells it, because the story is it's just a basic revenge story, and them kicking ass and taking names. That's kind of the end all be all of it. Like eventually they lead to another attack. The third spot he wants to attack is Los Angeles. And that's where shit gets real, gets even worse. He sends like 15 times the army. And of course, the authority are there to stop him. And meanwhile, while that's all going on, they send Midnighter to take out Gamora Island, basically.
Right. They found a way to kind of teleport him into their, because they have what we're talking about, the impenetrable force field, and that's around Gamora Island. And Midnighter kind of finds a way inside, but he also finds a way to find the Carrier inside. So he just brings it and just rams the Carrier into the HQ of Kaizen Gamora, and he does that whole like, I love my job, and then he like runs into it's like, oh my god,
it's over the top and silly and fun.
And then it was like the Gamora was just like, I was just wanting to have some fun. I just want to do whatever I want. Yeah,
I just want to have some fun.
Yeah. And what I talked about earlier too, about kind of some parallels to the like what I found in this book, to like Brian Hitch's other books and stuff, like this is kind of reminded me a lot of Volume 2 of the Ultimates, when they had the Masters of Evil, their version of the Masters of Evil kind of attack DC with all the stolen powers and stuff from the Ultimates and stuff. So it just really reminded me of that kind of all out brawl and war from all these super villains, super powered, just WMDs that we said before. So it was just kind of reminded me a lot of that, especially like the art and how he did it as well. So it was very good.
Yeah, I will say that I enjoyed the second arc a little bit more, because I feel like they're just kind of wrapping up threads that were left over from the previous Starwatch arc. And it's interesting, because I did read The Authority when I was much younger, when I was in college, but I hadn't read any of Stormwatch, so I went into The Authority completely blind when I read it as a kid, or not as a kid, a
Yeah,
college kid.
that kid in college.
Uh, yeah. And it's funny because like it was completely accessible. Like it was like, yeah, there's obviously references to other characters and other scenarios that I didn't know, but I was like, it again, like I said, it's such a visual read.
Mhm.
I did find when I was rereading this time around, and I did read Stormwatch going into it, and like, while I enjoyed Stormwatch, it's very ready, like heavy. It's a lot of dialogue, a lot of like, this relied very much on Brian Hitch as a storyteller and let the visuals do the talking. Yes, there's dialogue.
For
Yes,
sure.
there's conversations. Yes, you got some really good character dynamics going on, but it really does rely on just letting Brian Hitch breathe and tell this epic story. And that's why it works.
Huge splash page panels of just not only just the big fights, but the devastation. It's so fun to
Mhm.
see. I love how the inker and the colorist too
Mhm.
does the halo around Apollo. It just looks so cool.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you're absolutely right. It's gorgeous. It's literally gorgeous. Like that's and that it again. Whether the Warren Ellis of it all or whatever, it's like the Hitch's art is worth the price of admission on this book, I would say.
It's very good. It's so fun, and just it makes all the characters look cool too. So the next storyline that came out with the Authority after the Gamora Island was the Albion invasion, right? It was like
Yeah,
Scion.
sliding Albion, I believe.
Right. Okay. So I always said it like I was saying Albion in my head, which is who knows, like who knows what goes on in my head. But this was referenced earlier in the Stormwatch when they kind of went over the whole Jenny Sparks storyline and throughout her. It's kind of like her early life. They did like one issue of
Yeah,
just
so
like her life
yeah,
until
her backstory.
right. That was like there was a cameo from the main guy from Wildcats too. Was in that little party that they kind of go over.
Hmm. Yeah,
But
the short dude.
yeah, the short dude.
I wasn't a huge Wildcats fan. I know like the primary characters, and after that, I'm just like, yeah.
Yeah, Wildcats. They had that cartoon at the time that was kind of like low budget kind of
One
cartoon. That was
season.
yeah. I watched it. All right, it was on like USA. But in this story arc, the Authority stop an invasion by a parallel Earth, which it was mainly like this race of aliens that kind of come in contact with like Britain and Italy. They're called the Sliding Albion, and the Albion is an alien race that came into the Earth around 1600s,
Yeah,
and
about 600.
instead of like either fighting them or keeping it under wraps, they're just kind of like, hey, I like you, you like me. Let's kind of progress together and have some fun and see where we can grow this Earth into like a planet that we all can make better, basically. And throughout the years and years of just coming together, they've interbred and they kind of mainly kind of stayed in Italy, right? They were kind of like this
Yeah. Basically,
their home
yeah.
base,
The Blues come in. That's what they're called. The Blues come in, and they're like,
right?
"Yo, we want to work together." And so, like, we're going to take over Italy and interbreed with the Italians, and the English. You take England and do your thing. And they basically just like imperialize. They just imperial
Mm-hmm.
takeover of the entire world. Um, like the Blues kind of interbreed with the Italians, but what ends up happening is like not genetic drift, but breeding basically starts to falter, and they start to like lose the ability to like continue having children. That leads to some really heinous stuff.
Yeah, they eventually kind of make China into this whole rape camp
Yeah, they literally
country.
say the words
Yeah,
rape camp over and over again, which,
right.
especially coming off the whole thing with Warren Ellis, is pretty problematic.
It's very it's like oh
Yeah.
buddy, oh buddy.
Yeah,
Uh,
so what happens though is like, they basically like, well, we need to go conquer other worlds. And so this is where the Jenny Sparks of it comes in. They basically kind of cut through the bleed to meet up, to take over our Earth, or the Jenny Sparks Earth rather, and she kicks some ass, takes some names, and that kind of fails a little bit.
yeah, she's kind of. I like the part. She's like them again. Like,
Yeah,
didn't I just deal with these guys like 50 years ago? Like, what's
yeah,
going on? And then you find out too that she had her first husband
yeah. 15
was a
minutes.
blue. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing too is interesting. It's like they try and send through, like they try and like bleed off their like viruses that have like kind of killing their own world. And it ends up like when it goes through the bleed, it comes through basically and doesn't do anything to our Earth back in the
Right.
1950s. But basically the effect is that population centers are down. They've lost the ability to kind of like, go through the bleed and like find other worlds. And by about 1999, that's when they're like, okay, we figured out how to do this again. Let's reinvade this Earth again and kick some ass.
Right. And then they find out like, there's a whole other super team on here.
Yeah.
And Jenny Sparks, you're still here. Okay. And they kind of get their shit kicked out of like it's kind of like they weren't really ready for it. And I love kind of the panels where you see these teleport doors open, and you see these guys in these like colonial British army uniforms and horses, and they have muskets. And then in
they're like laser
panel,
muskets, though.
yeah, they're like laser muskets. In the very next panel, they have like these spacecraft fighting ships that are way more advanced than our current ones. And they were saying like, yeah, they aren't even on our level. And then the guy's doing it like through a telescope, with like an old ship telescope. So it's
they're like literally using like a wheel like you would use on a ship to like steer and stuff like that, like on an old like like a galleon, Spanish galleon or whatever.
Yeah, it's like a weird Victorian / steampunk / sci-fi. And then you kind of see the moment with Jenny Sparks kind of takes out all of their technology, becoming like this huge electrical kind of being. And you have that Wolverine to Cyclops moment where he's just like, sometimes you kind of remind me of why you're kind of the leader of this. With Midnighter does that, who at the time is already he was kind of getting his ass kicked too. So it was just kind of like, oh, maybe I'm not the most badass person on this team, which was a great kind of moment.
She literally has the Doctor stop the rotation of Italy on the planet, so that way because Italy is stopped but the Earth keeps moving, the ocean just floods it and destroys Italy in the process. She's like, yo, we just took out the imperialist governments that have been ruling you for the last 400 years. Do better, or we're coming back to kick your ass again. I will say, though, I really did like this arc because, I think I talked about it earlier, but like I didn't. The first arc is like fine. It's blockbuster, it introduces the team, all of that. But this one, I felt like now we're getting into the weird Warren Ellis that we like. The one that's like really exploring alternate realities and alternate futures and like alternate technologies and stuff like that. I really enjoyed this arc for that reason. I like the art design. Like I said, I love like you mentioned earlier, the sort of Victorian era mixed with, futurism. So I feel like they were like found a really fun groove there with that.
And Brian Hitch could draw the hell out of an action battle scene. Like it again reminded me of the Chitauri invasion in the Ultimates. It was very, it was just very well drawn, and you could tell what is happening.
Yeah,
which it's pretty rare sometimes with a lot of this battle stuff art.
Yeah.
And then from there on, the last arc was called the God arc. It's kind of something I've been calling the God arc. What would you kind of call it?
It's cool. It's called Outer Dark, but
that's what it's called. Yeah,
yeah. Well, no, it's called Outer Dark, but it is. It's the God arc, and that's where basically the being closest that we would identify as God had created Earth like 6.8 billion years ago, and then goes off to like just search the galaxy, and is like, or the universe is like, cool, I'm done, I'm coming back home to retire. And he finds when he gets back this God like being, the hell are all these little ants doing on my planet? Why is there an atmosphere? Like, why is there air there? Why is there water? This isn't cool, man. And like literally launches like all these parasites, and like he basically launches like what is it, like or not goddamn, what's the word?
They look like leeches to me, or even just
but
aliens,
I mean, like, how like terraformers, terraforming, terraforming leeches into the planet to basically remake it to an inhospitable gas planet that he can like chill out on. And guess what? Meanwhile, while this is all going on, we're coming to Y2, the end of Y2K, or the beginning of Y2K, or whatever. It's like literally December 31st, 1999.
Yeah.
Which, and so what does the authority got to do to stop this thing? And this thing is bigger. It's like essentially it's like not as big as the moon, but it can be seen in blotting out
In
part of the
orbit,
moon.
yeah.
Is like it can be seen. It's like a giant pyramid. And they're like, well, let's take the carrier, our big ship that's 50 miles long and 35 miles deep, and fly into one of its pores. That's how big this thing. Yeah, one of its pores. It's like it won't even recognize what we are. They start flying through this thing, and literally there's civilizations that have already like lived in this thing that have
Right.
grown and that's how long this thing has been around.
And they have to deal with that, but then also the actual antibodies from
Yeah.
the god, and they have a ticking clock as well to help.
Yep.
Because with Jenny Sparks, I mean, you find out that Jenny Sparks, the whole thing about being a sentry being or a sentry baby is that she's done. And when the clock turns 12, and not even like it's the very first clock on 12, or like I said, it was like Ethiopia, the very first time zone that's 12.
Yeah.
And then she's gone, and so they have to try to get it done before she dies.
Yeah, and what the plan is, and they don't know this really, is that she's going to fly into the brain of this god. Remember, the brain is like powered by electric energy, and she's going to fry the fucking thing,
Yeah.
with the last of her being.
And this almost takes out Apollo as well, because he uses all his solar reserves at the time too.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's just, they were kind of going all out, just trying to stop this god, like it's like taking out God. And it's just like each one of these are just its own trilogy of summer movies. It was great. It was like a great mini series. That you would definitely kind of watch on a big scale, which was great. And they weren't small problems either.
No, they were big. They were things that the authority had to handle.
Which is kind of funny how this team started from the covert small problem team.
Yeah.
Compared to the other Stormwatch teams, like with Hawksmoor and Swift and Jenny Sparks, and just how she kind of took the role of leadership, which she didn't want from the very beginning with the authority, and then even going out like a boss at the end. Yeah,
what I liked about this team too, besides that, like it was that they all did work together. It reminded me a little bit of, this gonna sound silly, and we just talked about it, but like a Star Trek crew. What I always liked about a Star Trek crew is that, there might be a little bit of bickering every once in a while, but for the most part, they all treat each other as professionals, and they all work together hand in hand for the common good, for the greater good. This is what the authority does. They bicker a little bit here and there, but overall, they were like, we have to make the world a better place. That is where our job is. We have to do better. We have to be better. And they worked together. They didn't like get in each other's shit about it. They were like, there wasn't like that inner political fighting within the team, or that dynamic. It was like they treated each other as professionals. Yeah, they joked and they flirted and all that, but there was that dynamic of, we're here to get a job done and do it right.
Yeah, they were all for the mission. I think anytime they started to bicker or anything, they would remind themselves of the mission, and then just be like, got it. That's right. Like, let's go.
It changes a little bit when you get to Mark Millar's run, but we'll save that for later. But like that team was a little bit more like party goers, but at least for Warren Ellis's run, it was a little bit more professional. And I really enjoyed that. Another relationship I liked, I bet you have it already queued up in the notes right there, Josh.
So like one of the big impacts of authority on all of like comics was the relationship with Midnighter and Apollo, because you come to find out that they're a gay couple. And but I love the way how they did it. They didn't just say, "Oh, hi, we're gay, we're together." They just were just acting like a couple, and they just had the moments together, and they weren't it wasn't like overt or something like too crazy. It's just how any normal like couple would be kind of like form and be showcased.
It treated as if like a real living, breathing couple. It was like you just said. It was like not like done to like, hey, look at us, point.
Right.
We're doing this thing. It was just like, I'm gonna miss you. I'm gonna miss you too. Good luck out there. Kiss. And you're like, oh, well, where did that come from? That's cool.
Right.
Where the hell did that come out of? Okay, great. Okay, we're doing that. Awesome. And obviously they've leaned into a little bit more later, like really leaning into Midnighter, being gay, and Apollo being gay, and they kind of put flashing lights on that on the DC books. But at the time, it was just more of like, here's this couple. That's all we need to say. Let's get moving. mission counts.
Yeah, it was done like we said organically, and I liked just how it wasn't
It
a
wasn't
big deal.
sensationalist. It wasn't
It was
sensationalized.
exactly. It
It
wasn't.
wasn't done for the likes or for the grams or whatever you want to call it. It was like done because like this is just two people that are in love, and that's great. Cool.
And
Great.
the two badass characters are together. It's like it was
Well,
great.
it's Superman and Batman. If Superman and Batman are great, let's give them more of that. I'm all about it. Cool.
Yeah, and
Give people
and-
representation.
yeah, and it's great how they've become kind of like a premier couple in DC and Wildstorm as well. It was just great. That's why I really liked. I like those two characters in particular. Just how they kind of started too. They were just these rogue kind of superheroes that lived on the streets for like 5 years trying to do what they can.
Which is funny. You think about that, like, oh, they're rogue characters. I'm like, dude, you're literally Superman. You absorb like solar energy. You're not exactly like Black Ops, like living under living in the alleys. I'm like, I can see Midnighter being that, but it was so weird. I'm like, dude, you're a sun god, dude.
Yeah, like you say, like we've been covert for like 5 years, and then in the same issue, he's taken out a full army of these ships by himself. Like, yeah, no, I got it. But I was still just like it's like the Superman and Batman opposites too of how their characters are. Where Midnighter is more grim. He is more a little bit more pessimistic and stuff. And Apollo is just kind of the voice of reason to him. He kind of calms him down, and it's like, oh yeah, totally. Like he jokes around he's the more joking around instead of joking about, if that makes sense.
Which, by the way, if you want to read some good Midnighter stuff, I know you kind of joked about Ennis being the sort of edgelord, but I like there's a Midnighter collection that has like I think Keith Giffen wrote it along with Warren or with Garth Ennis. It's fun if you like that. It's more of that. But
I'm
speaking
all about
of
Keith Giffen too.
I know you are. Well, speaking of edgier books, if you like this book, what are other superhero teams that are of this ilk?
I mean, we discussed it kind of at length, but the most like parallel to this is really the Boys, and
the Ultimates.
And the Ultimates. I think the Ultimates were trying to do the Authority within the confines of what they could do in Marvel.
Yeah,
which still worked and still with the characters, and it was Millar, and Hitch, but just the craziness and just it's I don't want to say edginess because it's still the Ultimates, but it's as edgy as it could be.
It's as edgy as the Marvel universe will let it be, while still staying within the confines of the Marvel universe. I mean, that's the big famous. Does this A stand for France?
And they got in so much trouble for that. And you see a lot of kind of the parallels too, like we've said, a lot of the Hitch kind of framing and the punching through people and things. Yeah. So again, like you said, it's just as edgy as they could be in the confines of Marvel.
Yeah.
And the Boys is that's edgy and craziness everywhere.
I hate to say, I'm going to go off on a rant here for real quick. I apologize, Josh. Look, I am a big Garth Ennis fan. I think when he writes something serious, it's really good. When he gets a little satirical and silly with the Boys, like I'm not the biggest fan of the book The Boys. Like once he got like the stupid shittiness out, like just the teenage humor, like edgelord humor out of the way, like the book is good. I do think that the show makes the book better than it is, if that makes any sense. I do think that the show is better than the book. I think it takes the best elements of the books and improves upon it without like kind of stooping to some of the stupidity we see in it. I do think though that there is going to be that in comparison, if the Authority does get made as a movie, like, well, we already saw that with the Boys. And it's like, I don't know if they can go as extreme enough to make it work. I don't know how they're going to differentiate themselves enough from the Boys, but at the same time from the Justice League as well. So I'm curious to see how that's going to get developed. You know what I mean?
Yeah. And I mean, I think the Authority is pretty edgy and just, adult and brutal. But I don't think it's on the same level of that as the Boys. So I think it's a little bit more palatable.
Palatable. Well, see, that's the thing, though. It's like, go ahead. But I was going to say, that's the thing, though, is you go to the Mark, which we weren't even talking about here, but the Mark Millar run, it's like literally he's got Apollo flying through the head of a character and, exploding his brains everywhere. You know what I mean? Like, it does kind of veer into like edgelord territory a little bit. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, I just say, but in this one specifically, it's definitely not. I mean, there's so many different parts of the Boys that are just
Yeah.
crazy and stuff that the Authority don't really get into, which
Yeah.
they don't get to that, like you said, that sophomore humor,
Hmm.
which I think is good. I mean, they do have kind of like the one-liners and
Hmm.
things like that, and it definitely Ellis and Miller have a lot similar dialogues a little
Hmm.
bit with how their characters kind of talk. There's a
Yeah.
similarity that you kind of see, and it's just I think The Boys is just on its own level of that type of like I put the Boys with more of like the Punisher, Ennis's Punisher run,
Hmm.
rather than on the same level as the Authority. It still
Yeah.
have those concepts and
Yeah.
the brutalness of it, but again,
Mhm.
it's not. I don't think it's at that level.
Yeah. Well, be curious to see if they can combine and make widescreen comics on the widescreen. Because that's
I
the one
mean, you're
thing. But The Boys is still a TV show ultimately.
yeah.
You know what I mean? It
I
looks like
mean,
a TV show. A good TV show, but a TV show nonetheless.
right, and I mean, just like James Gunn, your storyboard's pretty much already done. If you want to
Yeah.
do the Authority movie, your storyboards are done. I mean, that's most comics, but definitely for this one, this is again the house is cinematic, and it was just going through like a cinematographer going through this.
Speaking of other books, I mean, is there any books for fans that do like the Authority that they should jump on? Not necessarily Wildstorm books, but like actual Authority books that people need to know about?
Yeah, I think so. They started doing Stormwatch in that New 52.
Hmm.
Um,
The
but
Martian Manhunter?
yeah, and I was thinking you don't really need to read that. I did
Nope.
like the Superman the Authority book because I kind of moved on to the Superman War World Saga. I have to say that
Hmm.
right. War World Saga, which that was a fun book. They do kind of change the team and kind of some stuff where you're like,
Yeah.
I don't agree with that, but at its heart, I think I really like that book, and you could see the Apollo have interactions with Superman and being on the same
Yeah.
team.
What's funny about that book is like it's written by Grant Morrison.
Mm.
But the interesting thing about that is they add to the team a character from Action Comics called Manchester Black. Manchester Black, if you really know, he comes from an issue of Action Comics. It was Action Comics 775. It was written by Joe Kelly. I think Doug Mankey did the art. It's called "What's So Funny About Truth, Justice, and the American Way," in which Superman is forced to confront a authority-esque team
Authority
called
team.
it's called the Elite, but it's basically like how does Superman fit with 21st century heroes? The 21st century dynamic where you have drunken heroes that are just using brutality to take down menaces. They're kind of almost pseudo-fascist in a way in the sense that they don't believe in the law. They can do whatever they want. And it's like, how does Superman, how does this, archaic character from the 30s fit in with that, this new generation of heroes? And the Manchester Black is essentially Jenny Sparks, but just, done with a new skin. And it's like all of a sudden Manchester Black, it's like it's a weird like Ouroboros, like it's snake eating its own tail. When all of a sudden Manchester Black is now part of the Authority, he's just an offshoot of the Authority, along with the
Right.
fact that you have Apollo, who's just like an offshoot of Superman. This is a weird, like I said, snake eating its own tail kind of thing.
Yeah, they bring in Steel for it. It was kind of like the engineer
Yeah,
in a way,
yeah,
and then or more of the fact Mac,
yeah,
who's more of the engineer, and then Enchantress, who's more of
yeah,
like
yeah.
the doctor. So, but it's good. And then speaking of Jenny Sparks, so there is a new book. She's getting her own title right now. It's the Jenny Sparks
Yeah,
DC,
Tom
and it's
King's writing
actually
it, right?
it's a great book. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's a
I read the
good
first issue. I'm
fun.
gonna say I might have some issues with that.
Good.
But yeah, I read the first issue. I thought it was fine, but it felt just fine to me.
Yeah.
It didn't grab me enough to pick it up. I was like, maybe I'll read it when it's all finished in trade. The Jenny Sparks miniseries from Wildstorm back in the day, that is interesting. Mark Millar wrote that. I think John McCrae did the art. And that's when you find out the history of Jenny Sparks and how he pushes some envelopes in there. You find out that she's the one who told Hitler, "Your art sucks. Go do something else." And so instead of being an artist, goes on to become Hitler. And it's like, oh, Jenny Sparks, you're responsible for that. So that's some edgelord shit right there for you.
That's pretty much so. I'm really liking the new Jenny Sparks book.
That's good.
I think it's
Okay.
good. And then with it though, those are the Authority characters, and if you liked any of those, the Wildstorm is just a fun universe to get into. There's Planetary,
Yeah, I mean,
Wildcat.
yeah, Sleeper. I always felt bad that like DC just like kind of shit canned that whole thing, and then like trying to kind of integrate those characters into the DC universe. It's like I always like that it was like this is the adult version of superheroes, and then it kind of watered them down, whether it's Grifter or, like you just said, Planetary or Wildcats or any of that. Just I miss that because like Sleeper is a great book. It was like Holden Carver, I think it's the character in that one.
Yeah.
That's
Didn't we do a alpha episode on Sleeper?
If we did, I don't remember, and we should do it again anyway.
I think we did because I have I have screen grabs on my iPad for whatever reason. I don't do that when I normally read stuff, so I think we did.
Maybe I don't remember, but sure.
Sleeper's you're also old, so it's fine.
That's true too.
Huh?
I mean, what'd you say? No,
what?
Honestly, to that point, like real quick. So I will recommend if you're looking for other Wildstorm books, like check out Planetary, which it is Warren Ellis. So sorry about that.
Yeah.
But it is John Cassidy, who, rest in peace, just passed away recently.
Yeah.
But it's basically like 25 issues plus a couple specials of like some of the most awesome archaeological versions of pop culture mythology. It's like literally these are the archaeologists of the strange, and we'll probably end up doing an episode on this, despite the Warren Ellis of it all, because it is really such just a great book. But the whole point is that they explore like real life versions of in their universe of like the Hulk or the Fantastic Four or Doc Savage or Shazam or whatever. But the last one is that I would really recommend is Sleeper, which is basically Donnie Brasco, but in a superhero universe where a dude is like, you have to go deep cover and do some heinous shit, but we need you to do it because these dudes that are heinous are going to do some real bad stuff, and you've got to stay deep cover. And of course, the one person who knows that he's deep cover gets stuck in a coma, so he's like, "Oh, I'm in deep."
Yeah, and I like it's
Brubaker.
It's Ed Brubaker, but I love the Donnie Brasco and just the noir of it too, of his inner monologue and all that stuff.
Yeah, it's only like 24 issues plus like I think like a one issue special, like coup d'etat or whatever, coup d'etat. It's great. It's what made me fall in love with Brubaker. I was like, oh, this is some serious stuff here, and it's heavy. It's heavy, but in a good way.
In a very good way.
Yeah, in a very good way. So anyway, final thoughts about the book, Josh. What do you think overall?
No, I really like it. It's definitely something that I think a lot of comic book fans should read. It should be definitely on your list of stuff you should read. I think now how accessible it is. I mean, it's a little tough after reading it again without having to read Stormwatch. But I honestly, I would just save yourself from all the trouble and just read up on Stormwatch on Wikipedia and then we'll get into the Authority, because that's where it actually gets better and it gets fun.
Yeah, I still think you can read it without any of the Stormwatch of it all. Yeah, there's gonna be a few characters like, what are they talking about? You just have to just like assume, okay, those are characters from our previous arc or previous story, like but I think you can read it without those. I mean, if you really want to, like, great, but like good luck tracking down that Wildcats Aliens crossover. Like, it's virtually impossible. I have 2 copies in trade. I never got the single, and trust me, I held on to those just in case.
Yeah, goodness.
But I do think it's a bit dated, especially in it was so revolutionary for comics. Like, it changed how comics were, especially superhero like team books changed now because of it, that it seems a little dated when you look back on it. It's like when you watch like a movie, you're like, oh my God, this movie is so great. And then you watch it, like, oh, it's still good, but it's just, it didn't, I don't want to say it didn't age well. It's like things have aged beyond it now. You know what I mean?
Your nostalgia puts it into a different light than.
Yeah, but that's it. It's still gorgeous. It's still well written. It's still well done. It's just, don't go into it expecting like, oh my, get your mind blown. It's like, oh, you'll be like, oh, that's cool. Like, that's what I think. Just to make sure your expectations are at, like, do you expect a good superhero story? Yeah. Do you expect fun characters? Yeah. Do you expect good visuals? Yeah. Then you're gonna have a good time. Just don't expect like suddenly your worldview is gonna change walking out of it.
Oh yeah, it's definitely not deep. Again, like we've been saying this throughout this whole episode, and I think if we might even call it this in our name of the episode, but it's a summer blockbuster book. It's not something to anything like politically to change your mind. It's just it's a fun spectacle book that you just go and you have some popcorn and you pay your $15 now, which is that's a steal at the movies. But you just have a good time.
So it sounds like we have, I'd say, a B plus.
Yeah, I would give it that. I mean,
Now, in hindsight, at the time it would have been A plus, A plus all the way
right.
at the time. Now, about a B, B plus.
Yeah, I mean, it's just,
It's
I
so
think,
beautiful. It's fucking beautiful. It's still
yeah,
well
I think
written.
that's what's funny about like our past two have been beautiful books, Marvels
Yeah.
and then this one. And I think my whole thing is when I'm trying to read stuff, I'm trying to see, is this a fun read?
Yeah.
And it's definitely a very fun read for me.
It also reads really quick. It reads. I was like surprised.
Yeah.
Like it's funny. It took me so long to get through all those Stormwatch issues, but this one, like, I was like, I finished
Oh
it
my
like
goodness.
I want to say like in an hour and a half of that. I just like
Yeah.
burned right there. It's like, oh, because it is such a visual book, and I actually at that point like started looking up the supplemental stuff just to see if there's anything else I needed. Like, there's like a summer special. It's like a 14-page story or something like that about Hawksmoor post Jenny Smart's death, and he's just running around. Coley Hammer did the art, so it's not
Mm.
Brian Hitch, but Warren Ellis wrote it. And then there's like the Authority Planetary crossover, which even at the time I was like, this is a letdown. I reread it again. I'm like, it's still a letdown. I hate to say it. You know what I mean? It wasn't like a
Mm.
real. They crossed over, but they never met. You wanted them to meet. You know.
That's the whole point of a crossover.
Yeah, they kind of meet. It's not bad. It's just like it was like, oh,
You
I
wanted more.
wanted the team up, man. But that
Mm.
didn't happen. Anyway,
So again, like we said, we're giving it a B plus. It's a fun read. I think if you're a comic book fan, it's a must read. Just to see the visuals alone.
so that said, do you have any weekly recommendations people need to read beyond that book?
Yeah. So when we're talking about just beautiful books, one book that I started reading again, I think I even mentioned this on our first episode of why we love comics, but I'm going back to this book. It's called Once and Future. It's
Mm-hmm.
Kieran Gillen and Dan Mora, who Dan Mora is killing it right now. What is he's
Yep.
on? He's on Justice League
Justice League Unlimited,
Unlimited. He's on a Superman book. He did a great run with Wade on
World's
Shazam
Finest.
and World's Finest, and he did that that latest big Absolute Power.
Mm-hmm.
And Once in Future is it's just such a fun book. It's kind of like a mix of Hellboy with Harry Potter with
Mm-hmm.
Arthurian legend, and then just stories in itself. It's a great adaptation of just what if King Arthur came back today and he's not what we thought he was, and
He's
then
an
also just
asshole.
he's not great. and
He's an
then it's
asshole.
also just the power of the story. So that's what's great. It's it's not really just Legend himself, but it's
Yeah.
just more power of different stories, and you see different versions of
Yeah.
King Arthur. They kind of like
Beowulf too, right? Beowulf's in that.
Beowulf's in it, Robin Hood,
Yeah.
a lot of heroes that aren't great in
Yeah.
stuff. So and you have basically this guy and his grandma fighting off these mystical beings and trying to keep basically
Scabbard.
them. Yeah, exactly. Trying to keep them from taking over the earth. So if you're looking for like just another, I love books that take kind of known stories and kind of flip them upside down or
Yeah.
flip into a different angle.
Yep.
And this is definitely one of those.
Nice.
What about you?
I've been kind of buried with. I had to do all the cooking for Thanksgiving, so
Yeah,
I've been
I had my wife do
buried.
it.
Oh, that must be
My
nice.
wife cooked everything, and it was amazing.
Oh, you son of a bee. Okay. Yeah. So I kind of had to dig back into some of the backstories that I had read recently. My recommendation this week is going to be a book called Zatanna: Bring Down the House, by Mariko Tamaki and Javier Rodriguez. The writing is fine. I usually generally, as a even though we talk about how gorgeous these books are and they're worth the price of admission, I typically chase writers as opposed to artists. That said, like, the writing is fine. It's not bad, but the art in this book is knockout, drop dead beautiful. And on top of that, it's not just the art, it's the sequential nature of it all, like how he uses sequences and plays with the paneling and stuff like that. It is absolutely gorgeous. I highly recommend it. It just finished up the 5th issue like a couple months ago, and I'm sure it's going to be in trade really soon, so keep an eye out for that.
It's been kind of the running theme with this episode is that art has been really what kind of hooked us in.
Yes.
I'm not complaining because it's beautiful stuff to look at.
Yeah.
And with that, I think that's kind of it for this episode. Please make sure to continue to listen to us on Spotify, on Apple Podcasts, and on SoundCloud. We're trying to get the YouTube thing going. Once we figure that out, we'll let you know. Go on to our Instagram, and we're on Blue Sky now. We've been on Twitter, but we've moved away from Twitter, and we're on specifically on Blue Sky, and that's where you get all the new information on new episodes, and where you can kind of contact us on what you want to read.
You can look for me. The show is called We Got Issues Cast, but you can also look for me specifically as the BComp if you're looking for me on Blue Sky. And please feel free to add or send me a message.
Yeah. Definitely let us know of what you want us to kind of go over with. What you want us to go over, and something you wanted to learn more about or kind of get our opinion on. Which, I mean, I don't know who else would want my opinion on something, but if everybody else
Don't talk yourself down.
Wait in line.
Well, speaking of what are we doing next, because no one's reached out to us just yet. What are we doing next?
So we both were thinking like our past couples books have been kind of downers, just with the Authority and then Gotham Central. Not downers, but just kind of like
dark,
serious books. And Marvel's was in more of a serious book as well. So we thought we'd have a little bit more fun this time. So we're going to be reading Hawkeye, the Matt Fraction Hawkeye, the one that was around when was that, like 2015, 2014? Where was that?
They're on there. I know that it was around like the mid aughts. David Aja did the art. It came off the heels of the Iron Fist run that he and was it David Aja?
Yes.
It was him, David Aja, Matt Fraction, and then I think they had teamed up with Ed Brubaker to do the Iron Fist run back in the day. That was like around 2011, 2012. It's basically the primary source material for the Hawkeye TV show that dropped last year. So we thought, like, hey, it's Christmas time. Let's kind of line these two up.
Yeah, and it's a fun book. I'm really excited to be reading this again.
Yeah,
I love this book, bro. It's great, bro.
Yeah. No, bro.
Bro, it is so good, bro.
Please be sure to rate the episode. Give us 5 stars. And if you don't like it, give us 5 stars. If you really like it, give us 5 stars. It always helps.
If you don't give us 5 stars and you've listened to this, we'll know who you are.
Yeah,
and we're gonna tell all your friends and family that you did this, and then they're not gonna think of you the same, and you will get coal in your stocking this Christmas.
Great.
So, yeah, if that's not a threat, that's a promise. And please keep an eye out for the next episode.
Peace.